This is HFY Vanguard. Our history is written in defiance, our future in the stars. The journey starts here.
The desert wind howled across Proxima B7 like a living creature, its shrill cries carrying dust and sand that lashed against the reinforced walls of a solitary compound. From a distance, the structure seemed to rise out of nothing, a lone fortress set against endless dunes and fractured cliffs. To its sole inhabitant, Jack Harmon, it was both a sanctuary and a prison. For 15 years, it had been his entire world. Jack stood on the observation deck as the twin suns began their slow climb into the sky, painting the wasteland in shades of harsh orange and muted red. His broad shoulders shifted beneath a worn leather jacket, the fabric cracked and weathered like his own skin. Once he had worn the sleek uniforms of Earth's military expansion corps, polished boots and medals shining on his chest. Now his boots were scuffed, his hair cut short only out of habit, and his body bore the hardened lines of a man who survived not by glory, but by stubborn routine. At 52, he remained muscular, disciplined, and strong, though the weight of solitude pressed down on him, heavier than any battlefield. 15 years. That was how long it had been since he'd left Earth, left humanity, left the politics and betrayals that had soured everything he once believed in. People sometimes talked about retirement as a peaceful reward for years of service. But for Jack, retirement had been an exile chosen, yes, but exile nonetheless. He had walked away from comrades, from the possibility of family, from the very idea of belonging. Here on a remote world no one cared about, he built walls high enough to keep everything out, or so he thought. The compound itself had started as little more than a prefabricated military shelter dropped during Earth's first expeditions into the Proxima system. Jack had expanded it over the years with his own hands, solar arrays that spread like metal wings across the sand, water reclamation towers humming with quiet efficiency, hydroponic gardens tucked into shaded chambers. He called it a ranch perhaps, out of nostalgia for old Earth tales, but the only living things he raised were hardy succulents and the demons in his mind. His daily routine was his religion. Dawn always began with a systems check, scanning for leaks in the filtration units, recalibrating sensors, ensuring the defensive perimeter was intact. Then came maintenance, patching solar panels against abrasive sandstorms, lubricating machinery that hated the desert as much as he did. Meals were Spartan synthetic protein rations bulked out by whatever his hydroponic garden managed to produce. Occasionally, he would supplement it with something native, though the flora of Proxima B7 was more toxic than edible. After breakfast, he would exercise, pushing his body through punishing routines designed to keep him sharp. Solitude, he knew, could be a killer. The body had to remain strong, the mind disciplined. Otherwise, isolation could eat a man alive. And yet, even with all his routines, silence always returned. The silence of empty hallways of a dining table set for one of nights, filled with nothing but the sound of wind against the walls. He told himself he preferred it, that he deserved it, that solitude was freedom. But freedom had a taste metallic, bitter, and lonely. Jack sipped his morning coffee, the one luxury he had refused to abandon, even though securing real beans from the distant human settlement 300 miles away had nearly bankrupted him. He stared into the steaming cup as if answers might be hidden in the dark liquid. Memories rose, unbidden friends who had fallen in wars that never should have been fought, leaders who had lied to the public civilians, who had suffered while politicians played games. He had spoken out once. He had tried to reveal the truth, but the truth had nearly killed him, silenced by bureaucrats and assassins alike. That was when he had decided, no more. If humanity wanted to eat itself alive, it would do so without him. He had thought about death more than once, but death seemed too easy. Survival alone, unacknowledged, forgotten, felt more fitting, perhaps even punishment. This morning was no different from thousands before it. He leaned on the railing of the observation deck, scanning the horizon with eyes hardened by years of vigilance. Nothing, always nothing, that was the point. Out here there were no visitors, no wars, no obligations. He turned back inside, boots echoing against steel floors. The control room awaited him, its panels glowing with familiar lights. He checked the perimeter grid, noting with satisfaction that all sensors reported clear. He tapped commands into the water reclamation system, watching as clean drinking water cycled into storage tanks. Everything functioned as it should. Order was intact. Breakfast was quick, tasteless, efficient. He chewed slowly, staring at the utilitarian walls around him. Sometimes he imagined painting them, hanging up photographs, adding personal touches. He never did. Such things required hope for tomorrow, for company, for permanence. Jack had long ago banished hope from his vocabulary. After cleaning up, he moved to the maintenance bay. A solar regulator had been running at 98% efficiency for 3 days. That 2% loss gnawed at him until he stripped the unit apart, replaced the connectors, and recalibrated the circuit. He worked in silence, his mind empty, save for the hum of machinery and the steady rhythm of his breathing. Work was his companion. Work kept the ghosts away. By the time he finished, the suns were high in the sky, pouring merciless heat across the desert. Jack stood in the shade of the bay's entryway, wiping sweat from his brow when the thought hit him 15 years. Not a single visitor, not a single interruption. He had built this place to be invisible, and it had succeeded. He told himself again that this was exactly what he wanted, that he needed nothing and no one, that the world outside these walls had nothing left to offer him. But even as the words echoed in his mind, a faint unease stirred in his chest. A man could repeat lies often enough that they sounded like truth. But truth had a way of waiting, biding its time until it forced its way through. Jack shrugged the thought away and returned to his quarters. He poured a second cup of coffee, sat down, and let his eyes wander across the compound through the viewport. The wind had picked up, sending ripples through the dunes. A storm might be brewing. He would need to check the seals on the eastern wall before nightfall. Always something to fix, always something to prepare for. That was life. He raised the mug to his lips when a piercing alarm shattered the silence. Jack froze. The sound echoed through the compound, sharp and unfamiliar, cutting through the routine like a knife. For 15 years, that alarm had never once gone off. It was the proximity system, the one designed to detect movement outside the gates. The coffee trembled in his hand. He set the mug down slowly, his heart pounding louder than the siren. No one was supposed to be here. No one ever came here. And yet the alarm blared on. Computer Jack said, his voice rough from disuse. Display perimeter feed. The wall screen flickered and Jack's world changed forever. On the flickering screen, the desert storm raged at the outer perimeter, waves of dust swirling like smoke across the horizon. At first, Jack thought the system was glitching, false readings, perhaps triggered by the wind. But then he saw them. Figures. 11 shapes huddled together at the gate, their outlines blurred by blowing sand. For a moment, he simply stared, disbelief locking his muscles in place. He had lived alone for so long that the idea of any visitor, humans or otherwise, felt impossible. And yet there they were. He leaned forward, narrowing his eyes. These weren't human colonists. Their frames were too slender, their movements too fluid. As the wind briefly cleared, the camera feed revealed more pale violet skin glistening beneath tattered uniforms, patterns etched across their flesh, like living tattoos, hair streaming white in the gale. Their eyes, bright, luminous blue, seemed to cut directly through the camera lens straight into him. Proxians, Jack muttered. His stomach clenched. He had seen their kind before, back during Earth's expansion wars. Humanoid enough to unsettle, alien enough to remind him that this wasn't home. The nearest woman stepped forward, raising a hand against the gate. Her face emerged fully into view, and Jack's heart jolted. He knew her. Not in the way one knows an acquaintance, but in the way one knows a ghost. She had haunted his dreams for months. Visions of her face, her voice calling across endless dunes, her eyes staring into his. He had told himself it was stress, the oxygen mix, the price of solitude. But here she was alive, real, standing at his gate in the middle of a sandstorm. Impossible, he whispered. His hand moved automatically to the wall mount. The pulse rifle hung there untouched for years, but muscle memory guided him as he checked the charge and slung it across his shoulder. 15 years of solitude hadn't erased training burned into his bones. The storm pounded harder as he stepped into the airlock and cycled the outer door. Grit bit into his cheeks as he approached the transparent aluminum viewport. On the other side, the 11 women pressed close together, their ragged uniforms bearing insignia he didn't recognize. No weapons, no heavy packs, just desperation etched in every line of their bodies. The leader, the one from his dreams, looked straight at him. Their gazes locked and something surged through him like a current. Not just recognition, connection. When she spoke, her voice carried through the speaker system, distorted by static, yet unmistakably clear. Please, human man, we have nowhere else to go. Jack's grip tightened on the rifle. Every instinct screamed this was a trap. The Syndicate had been fighting the Northern Alliance for decades. Refugees, soldiers, spies, lines blurred in wars like theirs. 11 alien widows showing up at his doorstep could mean anything. And yet, the woman's eyes didn't waver. Our males were taken by the war. Now only you can help us survive. Her words hit him harder than the storm. Jack toggled the speaker, his voice rough. Who are you? How did you find this place? The woman pressed both hands against the gate, her patterns glowing faintly in the storm's half-light. I am Liana, commander of the 7th Battalion Northern Alliance. We are all that remains. Our transport crashed 10 miles south. We have walked for 2 days. Syndicate patrols will find us soon. They show no mercy to widows of Alliance soldiers. Her voice faltered on the last words, and Jack felt his jaw tighten. He had chosen this remote desert precisely to avoid the endless conflict between Syndicate and Alliance. He had carved solitude out of blood and silence, and now the war had come knocking anyway. Why here? His tone was flat, but his hand hovered dangerously near the gate release. Liana's blue eyes seemed to pierce through the reinforced barrier. Because I saw you in the dreaming, many times, a lone human who would shelter us when no one else would. Jack's blood ran cold. The dreams, she knew about the dreams. For 15 years, he had convinced himself that solitude was safety. Now 11 strangers were asking him to shatter it. Against every instinct, against all logic, his hand moved. With a groan of protest, the massive gate began to slide open. Get inside, he barked, quickly before the storm tears you apart. The women hurried through graceful, even in exhaustion. The wind clawed at them as they stumbled into the compound, their white hair whipping like banners. One by one they crossed the threshold until only Liana remained pausing to meet Jack's gaze once more. Thank you, human man. My name is Jack Harmon, he replied, surprising himself. Jack Harmon, she repeated the syllables strange on her tongue. The dreaming was right about you. The gate sealed shut with a final clang, locking out the storm and locking in 11 unknowns who could change everything. Inside the entrance chamber, silence fell heavy. 11 pairs of blue eyes stared at Jack with a mixture of relief, suspicion, and something else, hope perhaps. Their violet skins seemed to glow faintly beneath the artificial lights, the swirling patterns more visible now, shifting subtly as though alive. Jack adjusted the rifle across his shoulder, standing like a soldier before inspection. Water's there. Food too. Don't touch anything else. His voice was gruff, commanding, but inside his chest, his heart hadn't slowed since he first saw them. The women filed past him, their movements coordinated, disciplined, despite their exhaustion. These were no ordinary refugees. Warriors, every one. He had seen that same bearing in soldiers who had lost everything except the instinct to survive. Liana lingered as the last to enter. She gave him a small, knowing smile that unsettled him more than the storm outside. You have our gratitude. Jack said nothing. He simply turned and led them deeper into the compound. That night, sleep refused to come. He lay in his narrow bunk, staring at the ceiling, the images of the day looping endlessly in his mind. 11 alien women asleep in his converted storage rooms. The haunting blue eyes of their leader. The way she had spoken of dreams as though she had walked through his private visions. When he finally drifted into slumber, it was no relief. He found himself standing on a cliff overlooking an ocean he hadn't seen in decades. Liana's hand in his, her voice whispering words he couldn't catch. The dream was vivid, too vivid. He woke with a jolt, chest heaving, skin damp with sweat. It had been 15 years since he last let anyone into his life. Now 11 strangers slept under his roof. For better or worse, his solitude had been broken, and something told him it would never return. The compound felt different with 11 new heartbeats inside it. Jack noticed it the moment he stepped out of his quarters the next morning. For 15 years, the quarters had echoed only with his own boots, the hum of machines and the wind scratching against steel. Now faint voices carried through the halls, strange, melodic, undeniably alive. He tightened his leather jacket across his shoulders, as though to shield himself from the change. Habit drove him first to the kitchen, where the bitter smell of coffee already filled the air. Except this time he wasn't alone. Liana stood by the viewport, her white hair loose, glowing faintly in the dawn. She had shed her jacket, revealing a plain gray undershirt that clung to her slender frame. Her patterns shifted faintly across violet skin, as though alive. She didn't turn when he entered. "You're up early," Jack muttered, his voice still gravel from sleep. She glanced over, a calm unsurprise. "We require less sleep than humans. 4 hours is sufficient for Proxians." Jack grunted, reaching for the coffee maker. Coffee. Her lips curved faintly. "In my dreams, you always had this drink. I would like to try it." The mug froze halfway in his hand. "Dreams, you've been seeing me." "How long?" "Since the alignment of the 3 moons 6 cycles ago." Her eyes didn't waver. At first fragments. A man in a metal home surrounded by sand. Then clearer. Your face. Your name. Jack poured 2 cups, handing one to her. Their fingers brushed, and an electric jolt shot through him. He pulled back quickly, unsettled. Liana raised the mug, took a sip, and nearly grimaced at the bitterness. But after a pause, she tried again. "It grows on you." Jack leaned against the counter, studying her warily. "This place isn't on any maps. How did you find me?" She touched her temple. "The dreaming showed me. Proxians have always had the gift of dream sight. Most only see fragments of possible futures, echoes of the past. But some of us form connections across great distances." Jack exhaled slowly. "And you formed a connection with me. Why?" Liana set the mug down. "I do not know. The dreaming chooses, but I believe there is purpose." Jack found himself staring at her face, the delicate curve of cheekbones, the faint glow of patterns across her neck, the depth of her blue eyes. Alien, yes, but hauntingly familiar. Against his better judgment, he admitted, "I've dreamed of you too. For months. Thought I was going crazy." A small smile touched her lips. "Then the bond goes both ways. That is rare." Before Jack could answer, movement stirred in the hallway. 3 more women entered, their eyes widening at the sight of Jack and Liana standing so close. "Good morning," one of them said, her accent thicker. "We hope we are not intruding." Jack cleared his throat, stepping back. "Not at all. Coffee's here if you want it." He forced his tone back into gruff neutrality. "I need to check perimeter systems. Last night's storm may have damaged sensors." Liana tilted her head. "Perhaps I can assist. In my dreams, I saw your machines. I might be useful." Jack hesitated. Allowing her near his systems was a risk, yet he found himself nodding. "Give me 10 minutes." As he walked away, he felt her eyes on him, heavy as the sun's outside. The hours that followed were uneasy. Jack showed the women the auxiliary storage rooms he had hastily cleared the night before. They had already organized themselves with startling efficiency. Bedding laid neatly, gear arranged, personal routines established. Soldiers through and through. One of them, Maura, was crouched over a broken circuit board, her violet fingers moving with deft precision. Jack paused, watching. "You know what you're doing." She glanced up, smiling faintly. "On my world, I was an engineer before joining the Alliance. Your systems are different, but principles are the same." Jack gave a short nod. Impressive. He had half expected chaos, refugees desperate for shelter. Instead, he found competence, skill, purpose. Still not all was calm. In the mess hall, raised voices carried. 2 of the women argued in their native tongue, sharp and heated. Jack stepped inside, pulse rifle slung across his shoulder, and silence fell instantly. He let his gaze sweep across them. "You want to stay here? You follow my rules. No shouting, no fighting. You contribute or you leave. Clear." The women exchanged glances, then lowered their eyes. Even Liana inclined her head. For a moment, Jack felt like a commander again, and the weight of that role pressed against the solitude he had worn like armor for so long. That night, exhaustion should have carried him to sleep, but instead the dreams returned, stronger, clearer. He and Liana stood on a coastline of silver sand beneath 3 moons. She reached for him, her hand warm against his chest, her voice whispering words in a language he didn't know yet somehow understood. You are not meant to be alone. Jack woke with a jolt, heart hammering, the echo of her touch lingering. For years his nights had been empty. Now even sleep belonged to her. Days passed uneasy but undeniable in their rhythm. The women took tasks without being asked, some tending the hydroponic garden, others repairing filters or cleaning corridors Jack had long neglected. In the evenings, laughter spilled from the mess hall, soft and musical, filling spaces that had once echoed hollow. Jack resisted at first, clinging to silence, to distance, but slowly, inevitably, the walls cracked. One evening, he entered the common area to find Liana and three others gathered around his old datapad. They were laughing, actual full laughter, at something on the screen. What's so funny? Jack asked, leaning over. Human entertainment, Liana explained, eyes bright. A program called Friends. The misunderstandings are hilarious. Jack shook his head. That's ancient. Outdated even when I left Earth. The human obsession with finding a mate is fascinating, one of them remarked. Jack smirked. Usually more complicated than that. Another tilted her head. And humans only take one mate for life. Some do, Jack admitted, suddenly aware of how close Liana was sitting beside him. Others, it's complicated. Liana's voice dropped softer. For us, when minds connect, bodies follow. No separation between spirit and flesh. Their eyes met. That electric current surged again, undeniable. The room grew quiet. The laughter faded. The others glanced away, sensing something private blooming between their commander and this solitary human. Jack broke the moment by standing abruptly. I'll check the perimeter. Garden sensors too. But even as he walked away, he knew the truth. His solitude was crumbling. And for the first time in 15 years, he wasn't sure he wanted to stop it. That night, Liana came to him in dreams again. Only this time, she wasn't just an image. She reached into him, showing memories of her childhood beneath silver-leaf trees, of battles fought, of husbands lost. He felt her sorrow as though it were his own. When he woke, the emptiness beside him in bed felt unbearable. He had let them in physically, yes, but the deeper question lingered: would he let them into his life? His heart, his very soul. For now, Jack told himself, he would hold the line. Keep order. Maintain distance. But even he knew it was a lie. The walls of his fortress were strong, but walls around a man's heart were always weaker than they appeared. And Liana, haunting, persistent, undeniable, was already finding the cracks. The days that followed blurred into a rhythm Jack had not known for years. Activity, voices, and the constant hum of other lives brushing against his own. At first, he told himself it was temporary. Refugees came and went. When the syndicate's patrols moved elsewhere, the women would leave. But deep down, he knew better. This wasn't a storm to be weathered. This was a tide creeping steadily into every corner of his carefully guarded solitude. They made themselves useful. That was the first surprise. Jack had half expected them to collapse, too weak from their journey to contribute. Instead, each one threw herself into work. Moore, the engineer, had practically claimed his workshop, repairing circuit boards and recalibrating sensors with deft precision. Neela had an instinct for plants, expanding his hydroponic garden with native flora he had dismissed as useless. Cora tended to bruises and cuts with Proxian remedies that smelled strange but worked better than anything in his med kit. And Liana was at his side, watching, listening, offering help where she could. She seemed to know when his patience thinned, when silence was what he needed, and when he required the steadying weight of another presence. It unsettled him how quickly he adapted, how easily their laughter filled spaces he had long considered hollow. He found himself lingering in the mess hall just to hear them trade stories, even if half the words were in their language. He found himself answering their questions about Earth, about human customs, about why a species would build monuments to music or monuments to war. One evening, after a long day of repairs, he walked into the common area to find the floor cleared, the data pad wired into the speaker system. Curious, he asked, "What's this?" "Entertainment," Neela answered, grinning. "You will teach us human dances." Jack snorted. "Dances. Yesterday you taught us the handshake," she countered. "Today something new." The others nodded, expectant. Liana stood nearby, her eyes already locked on him. He sighed, scrolling through his music files until he found something old and slow. "Fine. This is a waltz, formal, structured. Humans used it for ceremonies, for courtship. He demonstrated the steps, alone awkward, in the empty space. Then taking a steadying breath, he extended his hand to Liana. "May I?" She placed her hand in his without hesitation, warm and delicate against his calloused palm. He guided her through the motions, his boots scuffing against the metal floor. She moved with natural grace, untrained yet fluid, as though she had always known how to match his steps. The others watched fascinated. "Your bodies don't touch much." Talia observed, curiosity outweighing shyness. "Is this truly how humans court?" Jack nearly tripped. "This is old-fashioned," he explained quickly. "Reserved. People were more formal then." And now Liana asked, her voice low, her eyes never leaving his. Jack swallowed. Now things are different. He switched the song to something faster, looser. The common area erupted in laughter as the women tried mimicking his movements, some with surprising rhythm, others stumbling with cheerful awkwardness. Even Jack found himself laughing, a sound rusty from years of disuse. For a fleeting hour, the compound felt less like a fortress and more like a home. But where bonds grew, so did fractures. Not all of the women approved of the closeness between Jack and Liana. He caught the glances, the whispers. Some resented how their commander lingered near the human, how their eyes met too long, how her smiles were reserved mostly for him. It came to a head one night when Jack returned from inspecting the perimeter to find two of the women in heated argument outside the storage quarters. Their voices rose sharp in their native tongue until silence fell at his approach. "What's going on?" Jack demanded. The younger one crossed her arms, defiance flashing in her bright blue eyes. "You favor our commander. You let her into places you keep closed to us. This is not equality." Jack's brows knit. She volunteered to help. That's all. Kay's patterns flared, glowing with emotion. "And when the syndicate comes, when hard choices must be made, will you fight for all of us or only for her?" The words cut deeper than he expected. He opened his mouth to answer, but Liana's voice came from behind, calm yet firm. "Enough. Jack has given us shelter, food, safety. He owes none of us more than that." Kay lowered her gaze, but not her anger. She turned and stalked away, the others following in tense silence. Jack looked at Liana. "She's not wrong. I have been different with you." Liana's expression softened. "The dreaming binds us. It is not favoritism. It is fate." "Fate," Jack repeated, tasting the word like a foreign food. He wasn't sure he believed in it, but he couldn't deny the truth. When Liana looked at him, he felt seen in a way he hadn't in years. That night, the dreams returned stronger. Jack found himself pulled into Liana's memories, her childhood beneath silver-leaf forests, her laughter as a young cadet, the bitter grief as syndicate raids tore families apart. He felt her emotions as his own, her joy, her despair, her stubborn will to endure. When he woke, sweat drenched his shirt, and the emptiness of the bunk was unbearable. A soft knock at his door broke the silence. "Come in," he said hoarsely, half dreading, half hoping. Liana stepped inside, her hair unbound, her uniform replaced by a simple tunic salvaged from storage. She lingered by the door, hesitant for the first time. "I do not wish to disturb you." "You're already here," Jack replied, trying for gruffness but failing. She crossed the small room, stopping at the window where moonlight spilled across her features. "Last night you showed me your ocean. Blue waves, salt in the air. It was beautiful." Jack swallowed. "Pacific Coast, Northern California. I grew up there." "Will you tell me more?" she asked softly. He hesitated. Talking about Earth was harder than dreaming about it. Dreams carried no weight, no consequence. Words were real. Words brought memories clawing back. "Maybe another time," he muttered. Liana turned close enough now that he could see the intricate swirls of her patterns shifting with each breath. She raised her hand slowly, giving him time to pull away. When her palm brushed his cheek, warmth spread through him like a sunrise. "Proxians share thoughts through touch," she whispered. "May I show you?" He nodded, unable to form words. In an instant, his mind flooded with images, glittering cities, forests glowing with bioluminescent light, celebrations beneath 3 moons, the terror of battle, the grief of loss. Her life poured into him. When it faded, he was breathless, forehead resting against hers. That was incredible. "That is my world," she murmured. "Now you understand why we fight for it." The space between them vanished. Their lips met, tentative at first, then fierce, hungry. Her arms wrapped around his neck as his hands found her waist, pulling her close. Their minds touched as intimately as their bodies, a loop of sensation and emotion that left him trembling. When they parted gasping, Jack whispered against her skin, "I've been alone so long. I forgot what it felt like to want someone." Liana's fingers traced his jaw. "Then let me remind you." By dawn, everything had changed. Jack woke to warmth beside him, panic flashing for a moment before memory returned. Liana lay against him, her blue eyes open, watching. "You're still here," he murmured. She smiled. "Did you expect me to vanish with the dreaming?" He touched the patterns along her shoulder, marveling at how they shifted beneath his fingertips. "I wasn't sure. This is new." "For me as well," she admitted. "Proxians rarely bond outside our kind. But what happened between us was more than physical. The dreaming made it inevitable." Jack had no answer, only the awareness that the walls he had built for 15 years had shattered in a single night. But not everyone would welcome the change. Already he sensed tension building. The other women whispered. Kay's anger simmered. And beyond the walls of the compound, the syndicate still prowled, hunting for survivors. Connection had saved him, but connection could also destroy everything. And Jack Harmon knew the days of quiet solitude were over forever. Jack had always believed the past could be buried beneath layers of silence, hidden under the weight of routine and solitude. But Liana had torn that illusion apart. Through dreams and touch, she had seen pieces of his life he had long locked away. And worse, she asked questions he had spent years refusing to answer. The morning after their first night together, Jack sat in the workshop, a wrench heavy in his hand, though he hadn't touched the machinery for half an hour. His mind was elsewhere, faces from Earth comrades who had trusted him, civilians who had died when politics had failed them, the betrayal of his own commanders, the tribunal where he had spoken truth only for it to be buried beneath bureaucracy, the bullet that had nearly ended him before he disappeared forever. Liana appeared in the doorway, quiet as the morning light spilling across the floor. "You're thinking of Earth again," she said as though reading him. Jack gave a harsh laugh. "You see inside my head. No point denying it." She stepped closer, her patterns glowing softly. "Why did you leave truly?" He looked down at the wrench knuckles white. "Because I was tired. Tired of fighting battles that never ended. Tired of watching good people die while the powerful covered their sins. I testified against them. I thought truth mattered." He spat the last word like poison. "But truth is just another casualty. They buried it. They tried to bury me." Liana's gaze held steady. "So you ran." Jack's jaw tightened. "I survived." "Is that what you call this?" she asked gently, gesturing around the silent workshop. 15 years of hiding from the galaxy. From yourself. The words struck harder than any blow. He slammed the wrench down, the clang echoing off the walls. "What do you want from me, Liana? To go back to fight again? That world tried to kill me." She didn't flinch. Instead, she reached for his hand, wrapping her slender fingers around his calloused ones. "I want you to see that running is not the same as living. The dreaming did not bring me here by chance. You are meant for more than exile." Her conviction unsettled him, not because he disagreed, but because he recognized the echo of something he had once believed himself. That evening, Liana called a gathering. All 11 women assembled in the central courtyard, now partially cleared and adorned with scraps of fabric and desert flowers they had collected. Jack stood stiffly among them, suspicious, wary. "What is this?" he demanded. Cora, the eldest, stepped up forward. Her hair was streaked with silver, her patterns glowing with calm authority. "You have given us shelter. You have shared your food and your walls. You have formed a bond with Liana. Among our people, that bond is not private. It is part of the circle. Tonight we welcome you." Jack frowned. "Welcome me how?" Liana touched his arm, her smile soft, through the joining. The words meant nothing to him, but the weight in her voice made his pulse quicken. The women arranged themselves in a circle. Lights salvaged from emergency beacons floated in bowls of water, casting shimmering patterns across the walls. Incense of native herbs burned, filling the air with a sharp, sweet fragrance. Their violet skin glowed in the flickering light patterns, shifting in unison as though they shared one heartbeat. Cora gestured for Jack and Liana to step into the center. "Join hands. Close your eyes. Open your minds." Jack hesitated, every instinct screaming against surrendering control. But Lyanna's fingers slid into his firm, steady, unyielding. Against his will, he obeyed. At first there was only silence. Then warmth spread from her hand into his arm, most into his chest, until it engulfed him entirely. He gasped as his mind flooded not just with Lyanna, but with all of them. 10 other presences brushed against his consciousness, distinct yet harmonious. Images exploded behind his closed eyes. A city of living crystal spires shimmering under alien moons. Children laughing in fields of silver grass. Families torn apart as syndicate bombers darkened the skies. The screams of battle, the grief of loss, the stubborn spark of hope that refused to die. He staggered under the weight of it all, knees nearly buckling. But Lyanna's grip anchored him, pulling him back from the flood. Her voice sounded inside his head, clear and strong. This is who we are, and now you are part of us. Jack's chest ached. He had spent years convincing himself solitude was strength. But here, surrounded by alien minds that welcomed him without hesitation, he felt the hollowness of his self-imposed exile. These women had lost everything, yet they still shared. They still trusted, and they had chosen to include him. Tears stung his eyes before he realized they were falling. When the connection faded, he opened his eyes to see the women around him weeping too, their patterns glowing with shared emotion. Cora placed her hands on his shoulders. What was separate is now joined. What was foreign is now family. Jack swallowed hard, voice rough. I'm honored. Lyanna's smile was radiant, her patterns glowing with joy. And in that moment, Jack knew whether he had wanted it or not, his life was no longer his alone. In the days that followed, the compound transformed. What had once been a sterile fortress now blossomed with color and life. Fabrics adorned the walls, plants grew in every available corner, and laughter echoed through the halls. But with new life came new responsibilities. Jack found himself no longer the sole master of his domain, but the reluctant leader of a growing community. Every decision mattered: how to allocate food, which repairs took priority, how to prepare for syndicate patrols that might one day find them. He didn't want command again. He told himself he wasn't ready. But the women looked to him with trust, and trust was a weight he could not shrug off. At night in dreams, he shared more of his past with Lyanna. She walked with him through memories he had long buried: comrades dying in fire, politicians trading lives for profit, the tribunal chamber, where his testimony had been silenced. You didn't run from failure, she told him one night as they stood together in his dreamscape. You ran from injustice, from betrayal, but you kept your skills sharp. You built this place to last. Some part of you always knew you weren't finished. Jack stared out at the dream ocean, the waves crashing in rhythm with his heartbeat. Maybe I was waiting for a reason to care again. And now, Lyanna asked. He looked at her, at the way her patterns shimmered with hope. Now, maybe I've found one. Yet even as hope took root, danger loomed. One afternoon, Mora and Talia uncovered equipment buried beneath crates in the eastern storage bay, a long-range communications array, military grade. Jack froze when he saw it. Memories surged, orders transmitted across battlefields, desperate pleas for reinforcements, lies disguised as strategy. He had disabled the system years ago, choosing silence over entanglement. It is intact, Mora said, fingers tracing the circuits. Only the coupling is disconnected. With work, I can restore it. Jack hesitated. That array represented everything he had fled: Earth, politics, war. Reconnecting meant exposure, vulnerability, but it also meant hope. 11 women had placed their survival in his hands. Could he justify isolation anymore? Repair it, he said finally. His voice was steady, though his chest felt tight. But don't activate until we decide together what to send and to whom. Mora nodded, already reaching for tools. As Jack turned to leave, Lyanna appeared in the doorway, her hair braided with blue desert flowers. The preparations are complete, she said softly. We await you for the blessing. Blessing? Jack asked, frowning. Her smile was gentle. The joining was the first step. Now the circle celebrates you truly as one of us. Jack glanced once more at the communication array, then at Lyanna. For years, his life had been about shutting doors. Now every choice seemed to open one. Lead the way, he said. The courtyard glowed with lantern-light fabrics, fluttering in the evening breeze. The women stood in a circle, their patterns painted with ceremonial dyes, their voices rising in a haunting melody that resonated deep in Jack's bones. Liana led him into the center, her hand warm in his. "This is our most sacred ritual," Cora intoned. "Even in war, even in exile, we keep it. Tonight, Jack Harmon of Earth, you become family not only by bond, but by spirit." Jack swallowed, uncharacteristically nervous. He felt underdressed in his plain shirt, out of place among the glowing, radiant figures surrounding him. But Liana squeezed his hand, her pattern shimmering reassurance. "Appearances do not matter," she whispered. "Truth does." And as the song rose, as the women pressed closer, as the dream bond flared alive once more, Jack felt the last remnants of his isolation burn away. For 15 years he had been a man alone. Tonight he was something else entirely. A brother, a partner, a leader, and perhaps finally a man who belonged. The celebration of the joining still lingered in Jack's mind when reality came crashing back. For the first time in years, he had felt whole, woven into something larger than himself. Yet deep in the eastern storage bay, the communication array hummed quietly with renewed power, a reminder that solitude was no longer an option. On the third morning after the ritual, Mora found him staring at the array. "It is ready," she said, wiping dust from her violet fingers. "Fully functional. It only waits for activation." Jack's chest tightened. That single button carried weight heavier than any weapon he had wielded. With it came exposure, vulnerability, and responsibility, but also connection. Hope. He pressed his lips into a grim line. "Not yet. We send no signal until we agree together." But fate rarely waits for consensus. That evening, the proximity alarm blared again. Jack rushed to the monitoring station, Liana close at his heels. Mora's hands danced over controls, her voice tense. Multiple contacts at the western ridge, 6 vehicles, not alliance. Jack peered at the screen, stomach sinking. Sleek, angular shapes, engines cloaked to mask heat signatures, syndicate scouts. "They found us," Liana whispered. Her patterns rippled with fear and fury. Jack's training kicked in before panic could. Defensive positions. Neela Talia secure the array. Cora prepare the emergency bunker. Mora with me. Everyone else arm yourselves with what we've got. The compound erupted in motion. Where once silence had ruled, now the clang of boots and the hiss of powered tools filled the halls. The widows moved like soldiers, their discipline resurfacing instantly. For weeks they had rebuilt a home. Now they prepared to defend it. Jack checked his rifle. The charge was full, his pulse steady. It felt strange, almost comforting, to stand on the edge of battle again. 15 years of solitude had dulled nothing. At the monitoring station, enhanced scans confirmed the threat. 6 scout vehicles were encircling the compound, settling into formation. Through a high-powered scope, Jack glimpsed the syndicate troops, Proxians too, but harder, colder. Their pattern pulsed sharp and jagged, their eyes devoid of warmth. "They're scanning us," Morris said grimly, "counting numbers, mapping defenses." "Let them," Jack replied. "Our outer shields will make them hesitate." An incoming comm request pinged across the system. Jack nodded once. Mora opened the channel. A harsh voice crackled through a tension human outpost. "This is Commander Vex of the Syndicate. Our sensors detect unauthorized Alliance fugitives inside your compound. Surrender them immediately or face elimination." Liana's jaw tightened. Her fingers brushed Jack's arm as though to steady both of them. Jack toggled the mic voice steady. "This is Jack Harmon. This compound is a neutral human settlement under interstellar law. Any aggression will be reported to Earth authorities." The laugh that followed was cruel. "Earth authorities are 3 months away, human. You have 10 minutes to comply before we breach your walls." The channel cut. Silence hung heavy. Jack turned to the women. "They're bluffing. 6 scouts don't have the firepower to break our shields. They're stalling until reinforcements arrive." Liana met his gaze. "And what do we do until then?" Jack's voice was iron. "We hold." The next hour was a blur of preparation. Automated turrets hummed to life. Barriers slid into place. Shield generators warmed, projecting a shimmering dome around the compound. Jack's years of paranoia, every defensive system he had built just in case, were about to be tested for the first time. Inside, the widows armed themselves with salvaged weapons, knives, and Jack's spare rifles. They moved with practiced precision, eyes sharp, hands steady. Fear was there, yes, but tempered by resolve. Jack felt a surge of pride. In weeks, they had become more than refugees. They were a unit, his unit. Through it all, he felt Liana's presence beside him, not distracting, but steady like a second heartbeat. Their dream bond flickered with flashes of strategy, wordless reassurances, and beneath it all, the fire of shared determination. This was no longer just his fortress. It was their home. The Syndicate scouts struck as predicted. Energy blasts lit the night, slamming into the outer shield. Sparks cascaded across the barrier, lighting up the compound in bursts of blue and white. Automated turrets roared in response, spitting streams of plasma at the encroaching vehicles. The desert shook with the exchange. Inside the walls, the widows shouted updates, their voices overlapping but controlled. Cora moved swiftly, treating a grazed burn before the soldier even realized she was hit. Moore's hands flew across the console, rerouting power to reinforce failing shield sectors. Jack fired from the western parapet, his rifle spitting bolts that cut through the dust. One Syndicate soldier fell, then another. The old instincts surged, precise and merciless. But the enemy pressed harder. Explosives detonated at the shield perimeter, shaking the compound. Panels flickered. One generator sputtered dangerously. "We can't hold forever," Mora warned. Sweat streaked her glowing patterns. Jack's jaw clenched. He toggled the comm. "Send a message to New Hope. Tell Reed we've got Syndicate forces here and need assistance now." Liana shot him a look. "That reveals our weakness." "It's a calculated risk," Jack growled. "If Reed is true, we gain allies. If not, we're no worse off." Her eyes softened, patterns pulsing with reluctant trust. "Your instincts have kept you alive this long. We trust them now." Minutes dragged like hours. The Syndicate pressed shields, flickered ammunition dwindled. Then, just as Jack braced for the worst, Neela's voice shouted from the comm room, "Incoming signals east, multiple vehicles." On the display, new contacts appeared. A fleet of transports barreling across the desert, flanked by sleek fighters that bore Alliance insignia. Liana gasped, "Impossible. Alliance air support was destroyed months ago." The comm crackled, a new voice steady and familiar. "Harmon, this is Commander Reed of New Hope with General Terrace of the Alliance 7th Fleet. Hold position. Reinforcements inbound. Syndicate scouts will be neutralized within 15 minutes. Jack stared at the screen in disbelief. Reed, alive. Alliance still fighting, and together. Liana's patterns glowed, bright hope radiating through their bond. The dreams, they guided us here. To this moment. Jack's throat tightened. He pulled her close, battle forgotten for an instant. Then whatever comes next, we face it together. The battle ended swiftly once reinforcements arrived. Syndicate scouts tried to retreat but were cut down by Alliance fighters. Within the hour, the desert lay silent again, smoke rising from burning wrecks. The compound gates opened for the first time, not to refugees, but to allies. Human soldiers and Proxian warriors filed in, their eyes widening at the sight of Jack standing with 11 alien widows at his side. Harmony Ranch, they would later call it. But in that moment, all Jack felt was relief and the faint, terrifying weight of destiny settling on his shoulders. He had opened a gate weeks ago to 11 desperate women. Now he had opened it to a war, to a people, and to a future he had thought lost forever. 1 year later, Harmony Ranch would be a thriving settlement home to hundreds. But that night, standing beside Liana in the smoking ruins of Syndicate scouts, Jack understood the truth. Solitude had been his prison. Connection was his liberation. And sometimes the universe tested a man not by what he could endure alone, but by what he was brave enough to open his gates for. 1 year later, the desert looked different. What had once been a barren expanse of sand and stone now thrummed with life. Jack stood on the observation deck, where he had once stared into emptiness and silence, and for the first time he saw a horizon dotted with promise. New structures rose from the dunes, gleaming prefabs, workshops of native stone, irrigation channels that carried water from newly drilled wells. Where once there had been a fortress for one man, there was now a community. They called it Harmony Ranch. Below him, fields of green stretched in neat rows, Proxian tubers thriving beside earth grains. Human engineers taught irrigation techniques while Proxian agriculturists shared secrets of desert flora. The air carried voices, children laughing, tools clanging, music drifting from the common hall. 200 lives now pulsed where 15 years of silence had once weighed like chains. Jack rested his hands on the railing, breathing deeply. For so long, he had convinced himself he was meant to die alone. Now everything told him otherwise. Arms slipped around his waist from behind, soft and familiar. Liana pressed against his back, her patterns glowing in the morning light. "Admiring your handiwork," she teased. Jack covered her hands with his own. "Our handiwork," he corrected. "I just provided the land." She moved to stand beside him, her blue eyes reflecting the sun's. "And the heart. Don't forget that." Her words carried weight. Without Jack's choice to open the gate, none of this would exist. Without his willingness to surrender solitude, the fragile alliance between humans and Proxians might never have found its foothold. The dream bond had spread. What began between Jack and Liana had revealed something deeper, a resonance between human and Proxian minds, amplified by the strange magnetic fields of Proxima B7. Now dozens of human Proxian pairs reported shared dreams, visions of futures that allowed armies to predict syndicate moves before they happen. General Terrace called it their invisible network, a weapon syndicate couldn't track, couldn't understand, and couldn't fight. For Jack, it was never a weapon, it was connection. Proof that two species could share more than words, more than alliances. They could share themselves. Liana touched her temple, smiling knowingly. "The scientists say the planet itself enhances the bonds, that it wants us to connect." Jack chuckled. "A matchmaking planet. Figures the universe would play jokes on me." "Not a joke," she said softly. "A gift." That evening, the community gathered in the central plaza, once the cold metal courtyard of Jack's fortress, now paved with stone, adorned with lanterns, fragrant with herbs from the gardens. Commander Reed stood at Jack's side, his uniform sharp, his face worn but proud. Beside him, General Terrace, tall and solemn, patterns glowing faintly in the lamplight. They raised glasses together. "To new beginnings," Reed proclaimed. "To the dreams that guided us here," Terrace added. The crowd erupted in cheers. Jack caught Liana's gaze across the plaza, her smile radiant. Later, when the celebration dimmed, Liana led him back to their quarters. She paused beneath the three moons, their silver light glinting across her white hair. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly, "opening your gate that night?" Jack turned the question over carefully. He thought of 15 years of silence, of mornings with only machines for company, of nights haunted by ghosts of Earth. He thought of the alarm that had shattered it all, and the 11 figures standing at his gate. "No," he said finally. "I spent years hiding, convincing myself I was better off alone. But the moment you walked in, everything I never knew I wanted walked in with you. How could I regret that?" Liana's patterns glowed warm with emotion. She rose on her toes to kiss him, and he let himself be drawn into the embrace, the bond between them flaring alive with shared love. Weeks later, Harmony Ranch received more settlers, volunteers from Earth refugees, from shattered Alliance enclaves, farmers, engineers, healers, soldiers. The community grew not just in size, but in spirit. Humans and Proxians worked side by side, sharing skills, stories, even rituals. The lines between species blurred into something new. And then Liana gave him news that changed everything again. Cora, their healer, had examined her after weeks of subtle signs. The verdict: she was with child. Jack had stared at Liana in disbelief, his heart hammering. "You mean?" She took his hand and placed it gently against her abdomen, her patterns swirling with joy. "Yes, the first child of human and Proxian blood. The dream bond made it possible. Our bodies adapted, our spirits aligned." Jack had no words, only tears that slipped unbidden as he pulled her into a fierce embrace. For so long, he had thought his line would end. With him, that exile meant no legacy, no future. Now the universe had proven him wrong. Through their bond, she felt his joy, his awe, and the fierce determination that surged in him to protect this new life. "I never imagined," he whispered. Liana laughed softly. "Neither did I. But the dreaming shows us what is possible." The night they announced the news, the entire settlement gathered. Lanterns glowed across the plaza, voices lifted in song and laughter, mingled with tears. Maura Talia Cora, the other widows who had once stumbled through Jack's gates, stood with him proudly, each of them now leaders in their own right. Reed raised a toast again, to Jack and Liana, to the child who proves our worlds can be one. The cheer that followed was thunderous, and Jack, once the man who had hidden from everything, now stood in the center of it all, belonging in a way he had never thought possible. The next morning, Jack returned to the observation deck. The suns rose, casting gold across Harmony Ranch. Below, settlers bustled with energy, building, planting, training. The data pad in his hand buzzed with updates, construction reports, intelligence from the Dream Bond network, even a message from Earth hinting at official recognition of the settlement. Liana joined him dressed in the new uniform of Harmony Ranch, part human utility, part proxy and grace. She leaned into him, her presence grounding. "What are you thinking?" she asked. Jack gestured to the horizon where new frameworks rose against the sky. "I'm thinking that for a man who wanted nothing more than to be left alone, I've done a pretty poor job of it." Liana laughed, the sound still his favorite in the universe. "The universe had other plans for you, Jack Harmon. For us," he corrected, pulling her close. Together, they watched their community awaken to a new day. From solitude to family, from exile to belonging, from despair to rebirth, Jack Harmon had found everything he thought he'd lost. And all it had taken was the courage to open a gate.